The Grand Canyon on NP₃. Hi there, and welcome to the National Parks Photography Program. And today we're going to be talking about one of the absolute icons of the National Park System, the Grand Canyon. And specifically, we're going to be focusing on the south rim of the Grand Canyon, frankly because I haven't been to the north rim, so it'd be pretty hard for me to give you too much specific guidance for a visit to the north rim. But I will say that a lot of what I'm going to talk about in terms of making photographs at the Grand Canyon should apply to either the south rim or the north rim. So as I think about taking photographs at the Grand Canyon, the first thing that I'm really concerned about is dealing with visually in final images the rim of the Grand Canyon. A lot of times, and this isn't unique to the Grand Canyon, this happens pretty much at any canyon, but you can have this phenomenon where you have, if you're at the rim, where you have across from you, you have the far rim. So in this case, if we're at the south rim of the Grand Canyon, you're looking across to the north rim, and you have this just like straight line horizon, and you have a sky above that, and you have all sort of the awesome, cool action going on in the canyon down below that. But so many images I see of the Grand Canyon, don't do anything about that horizon. And so there's kind of this disconnect where, okay, yeah, that might be kind of a pretty sky, or there might be something interesting going on there, but it's just so visually separated from what's actually happening in the canyon that it makes the image less interesting. And I also think it detracts from sort of the sense of scale. I mean, the Grand Canyon is truly grand. It's a mile from top to bottom. It's 10 miles across or something like that. So it's such a massive place, and I really think it is one of the most challenging places to convey a real sense of in photographs. So this is the main challenge that I concern myself with when I'm going to the Grand Canyon. And there's a couple of different things to keep in mind that I'll talk about how I think you can work to overcome those challenges and make better photographs. So as with any national park, when you're at the Grand Canyon, you want to be real conscious of the light, and specifically sunset and sunrise. And so the canyon, for the most part, runs from east to west. So your sunrise light is kind of coming downriver, as it were, from the east, and your sunset light is going back upriver from the west. And so it's a little tricky from sort of the main, if you're at the Canyon Visitor Center or the main areas along the south rim, it's a little more tricky to get shots with the sun in the background in either location. So there are some points. So for instance, if you're heading out from the Grand Canyon Visitor Center out to Yavapai Point or Maricopa Point, you'll get some views either way, because those kind of those points stick out into the canyon a little bit. But it's worth being aware that it's a little bit more of a challenge to shoot straight into the sun or straight away from the sun at dawn and dusk, because most of the viewpoints are going to be looking from the south rim north across the canyon. That's not really a problem, but it does eliminate some possibilities to use the sun to help, when it's right on the horizon, to help bridge that gap between the sky and the canyon. And then again, as you're there at different parts of the year, the sun is going to rise and set farther north or farther south in the sky. So you want to do some research on this to find out exactly where it's going to be. But it's just a little bit more challenging to get that. So if we're thinking about shooting from the rim then, my favorite technique is to use foreground elements to help break up that line of the horizon. So I talked about this in my last video, talking specifically about foregrounds. But there's a lot of trees and bushes and things like that you can use that either just extend up into the sky, or that you can use to frame the image frame out some of that sky or frame out some of that horizon line. And so I think that's just a really strong way as you're researching. And some of the, I mentioned Yavapai Point and Maricopa Point before. And because of the great views and the panoramic views from those places, they can be very crowded, especially at sunset. So, if you have a chance to get to those places where you might want to shoot sunrise or sunset ahead of time and scout out, okay, what are some great foreground elements? What are some great angles that utilize foreground elements that I think are going to make for good images as I get near to, say, sunset? Because if there is a lot of people there and you might not have the freedom to move around and get nice images that aren't just full of crowds of people. And so, if you're getting there a little early and you're kind of staking out your spot that you're going to watch sunset from, you're going to want to be really conscious of how the foreground elements, can help improve your image from the rim. The second thing that can really help solve this problem, and this will happen, will help any time of day, is if you're fortunate enough to get some interesting weather. So if you have a day with a clear blue sky, that's very beautiful, and that's where using the foreground elements is really key, because there's not going to be nature providing anything in the atmosphere to help you out with this. But if there's some storms moving into the area, rain or snow, those clouds can be extremely dramatic and help break up that horizon. So you might be thinking, oh geez, this is too bad, I want to enjoy the Grand Canyon, and there's these scattered thunderstorms that are moving in. And that could also be a real opportunity. My favorite images that I've taken at the Grand Canyon came on a day where it was scattered snow showers, and having those clouds and the rain and snow falling from those clouds and having that move across the canyon just made the images. And so keep an eye out that if it's a trip where you're doing some hiking, you're doing some exploring, and you're prioritizing maybe 1 or 2 days of your visit for photography, and there's a day with a chance of some showers, that might actually be the best day to do the photography. The risk, of course, is you can get the whole place clouded in and see nothing, or you can have periods of fog and periods where the fog opens up and you have really dramatic views. So there's some risk, obviously, if you're doing, you don't want to get yourself struck by lightning or something because you're trying to get the perfect image. But how that sky can help break up the canyon and create extra drama is something to really think about. And then the third way, and the most reliable way, is to get down into the canyon. And I don't think you can really have a true Grand Canyon. Oh, that's not fair. I think you get a better Grand Canyon experience the more you can have a chance to get down into the canyon. Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind. One, it's a big canyon. It's a vertical mile from top to bottom. And so from the south rim, the two main trails going down into the canyon are the Bright Angel Trail, which leaves from very near the visitor center, and the South Kaibab Trail, which you take one of the buses out towards Yaqui Point, and you can get on the South Kaibab Trail there. And so, off the top of my head, I think Kaibab is 7 miles, and Bright Angel is 9 miles from rim to river. And again, that's with a vertical mile. So this is very difficult hiking, especially coming back out. And unlike some, say if you wanted to hike up to, get a pass and hike up to Half Dome in Yosemite, it's a real similar kind of distance and elevation gain, but you're doing the uphill part first when you're fresher, and where, if you just run out of gas, you stop and turn around. In the Grand Canyon, the easy part, at least cardiovascularly, is the downhill. And if you wear yourself out and now you have all this distance coming back out, it can be very challenging. Now, I don't say that to discourage you because it's so worth doing. Just, be aware what you're getting into before you venture down into the canyon. Now, of those two trails, they're both delightful, but if I could only do one, I would really recommend the South Kaibab Trail. And the reason is that Bright Angel sort of heads down into and follows sort of a slot into the rim of the Grand Canyon, whereas Kaibab goes down a little bit and then follows a ridge out into the Grand Canyon. And so you just get, I think, more interesting and more panoramic views from South Kaibab than you do from Bright Angel. And actually, the first great panoramic view on South Kaibab is Point, and I want to say that's about 1.5 miles down from the rim into the trail. And so you haven't gone all that far down, probably not even a quarter of the way down. And in terms of actual trail distance, it's you're dealing with a 3-mile-ish round trip. And so if nothing else, if you can get yourself down to Point, it's beautiful panoramic views of the Grand Canyon. And what makes getting into the canyon so special, and why I say it's the best tool to overcome this horizon issue, is as you get down into the canyon, there's all these, canyon features that are carved out by, the Colorado River over such a long period of time. And, the ones closer to you, appear visually higher, and the ones farther away appear, visually a little lower. And so they start sticking, because you're below the rim, these closer ones appear visually to extend up above the rim of the Grand Canyon. And so it starts bringing that scale. It starts breaking up that flat horizon and helping draw, when you're taking photographs, draw the person into the image and to create, again, that sense of scale in the image. And so I really think, and this is true unless it's fogged in all weather conditions, and it's just I think the most reliable way to get strong Grand Canyon images. If you can go a little further, Skeleton Point takes you about halfway down the canyon. So you're talking about 3.5 miles from the trailhead and a half-mile vertical drop. And just past Skeleton Point, it dips down off of the ridge you're on through some switchbacks quite steeply. And so to go farther than Skeleton Point, you're really going to have your work cut out for you. But I think for most people in relatively good shape, that is an entirely doable day hike to do a 6-mile round, or I'm sorry, did I say it was 6 miles? I think it's more about 3.5. Yeah, so it's about a 7-mile round trip and a vertical half-mile down and then back out. And if you take your time, and they say to plan for twice as long coming back up as it took you to get down. But Skeleton Point has just amazing views. And so my favorite image that I've taken at the Grand Canyon is from Skeleton Point. And it's sort of taking advantage of two of these things. It's got the extra depth created by being out into the canyon, and then it has this sort of very dramatic line of snow showers moving. We're looking mostly west in this image. So the snow showers are moving in towards us, and my wife and I did this hike together, and so I took this panorama, but just to sit there and hear the sounds of the canyon. And this is a spot where you get a nice view of the Colorado River below, and it was really one of the most special and dramatic experiences that we've had in the national parks. So and plus getting down into the canyon gets you away from most of the visitors to the Grand Canyon. So it's a little calmer experience, a little less crowded experience when you're down in the canyon. And they're both Bright Angel and Kaibab are both very popular trails. So it's not like, if something goes wrong, you're going to be, stranded all by yourself and no one's going to come by for a day. But, it's much, much less crowded than the Rim Trail is. And then if you're really adventurous and you want to have that full experience of going down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, keep in mind, first of all, that reservations, so Phantom Ranch is at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, kind of where South Kaibab and Bright Angel meet, and then South Kaibab turns into North Kaibab and heads up to the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So Phantom Ranch is down there, and there is camping down there, and there is some accommodations down there, but they fill up extremely fast. And so you have to reserve way ahead of time, and there's fines if you go get yourself stuck down there overnight without a reservation, and all of this. So plan ahead. And then on the way back out on Bright Angel, there's Indian Garden, which has, I believe, some camping. So there are a couple chances for accommodations down in the canyon, but they fill up very fast. So, if you've showed up and they're all full, chances are you're not going to get a spot to camp in the Grand Canyon, which leaves you having to do the whole down and back as a day trip. I have done the whole down and back as a day trip, and physically it's the most difficult thing I've ever done. And I'm in pretty good shape. I've done a half Ironman triathlon. I'm not one of these people that's just goes out and jogs a marathon for fun and it's super easy, but I exercise and I'm in pretty good shape, and I've done some fairly difficult endurance events. And for me, this was as difficult or more difficult than anything I've done. I do know people who are really good runners who can just go do this and it's not a problem. But for the majority of people, those are the outliers in society. For the majority of people, a day trip to the bottom of the Grand Canyon isn't recommended, and it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult. And they say the people who need rescue most often are, younger males who think that they can conquer the world and then get themselves in all kinds of trouble trying to hike back out of the canyon. So it's very difficult. It's doable if you're in really good shape, but it's very difficult. If you have the chance to do it, if you are in shape enough to do it, or you do get yourself a reservation at Phantom Ranch, it is a really interesting experience. It gets you down so you can see what all of the layers of the Grand Canyon are like, and it's just kind of a complete experience of the Grand Canyon without rafting it. Actually photographing at the very bottom of the Grand Canyon, because you're in this last little slot of canyon, isn't the most interesting. But just before you head down that, when you're on that lower plateau, there are some really interesting images, and you start getting nice views of the Colorado River and things like that. And staying down there also, I think, gives you more of a chance to shoot from lower in the canyon closer to sunrise or sunset, which is really nice too. And then again, like I said, so I've been mostly talking about Bright Angel, or about South Kaibab. Bright Angel has a lot of nice views from that lower plateau, and then kind of gets into a little more restricted views as you head into that slot and then up out of the canyon. But overall, whatever your level of ability is, if it's going down to Uwa Point, if it's going down to Skeleton Point, or if it's going all the way down to the river, if you're able, I can't recommend getting into the canyon enough, both for the experience and for how I think it improves photography in the canyon. And then the final thing I'll say about getting on the trails is, the mules famously, before I talk about photographing the mules instead of hiking, the mules, if you reserve them, are another way to do this that's much less strenuous and is a great way. So you can ride a mule and have these highly trained, extremely capable animals do all the hard work for you and see more of the canyon. But even if you're hiking, being on, getting down in the canyon gives you a great chance to incorporate the famous mules from the Grand Canyon into your photographs. And one of my favorites is of a park ranger who's just mounting his mule to lead a pack train of mules up out of the canyon. And these are sort of opportunities and things that only happen if you're hiking down into the canyon. That's my very brief overview. Again, with the Grand Canyon, I'm always trying to, you don't need me to tell you that sunrise and sunset at the Grand Canyon are really beautiful. And you don't need me to tell you that the rim of the Grand Canyon is very beautiful. And there's lots of stuff about that. But the main thing, if I look at what separates photos I really like of the Grand Canyon from just sort of so-so photos of the Grand Canyon, it's usually down to how that horizon line is dealt with. And again, 3 ways I do it are working with foregrounds, hoping and trying to work with interesting weather, and more than anything else, if you're able to get down into the canyon. So hopefully this helps you have a little bit better understanding of the Grand Canyon, and if you're planning a trip there, hopefully this is useful to you. If it is, please like this video, give it a thumbs up. Otherwise, to see more national parks and photography content, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Until then, get to the Grand Canyon, have a great day, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.